My name is Maria Lourdes Santos, but everyone calls me Lulu. I live a quiet life in a small town near Manila. I attend church every Sunday. I help with the youth ministry. I cook for my neighbors when they are sick. My days are simple. My heart is steady. My faith is my anchor. But one afternoon, something happened that changed everything. I felt a sudden heaviness in my chest. No pain, just a strange weight pulling me down. My vision blurred. My breathing slowed. I thought maybe I needed to sit and rest. Then the world around me faded. The sound of the fan, the noise from the street, even the ticking of the clock disappeared. I was floating above my own body, watching myself in the chair with my head tilted to one side. It was not a dream. It was not imagination. I could feel the air different. I could see the light bending around me. A glow appeared in the distance, gentle but impossible to ignore. I was drawn to it as if every part of me wanted to step closer. I passed through what felt like a veil, and on the other side, I stood before Jesus Christ. His presence filled everything, not just the space, but my soul. He looked at me and said, "My daughter, there is something you must see, something the world must hear now." In an instant, I was no longer standing on solid ground. I was floating high above the earth. It was like looking at a globe but alive. Clouds moved, oceans shimmered, lights from cities blinked far below. I could see the curves of continents and the deep blue that stretched endlessly. I felt both small and overwhelmed, yet somehow completely safe because he was there. Then, from my right, a sudden brilliance grew brighter. A figure emerged, massive and majestic. An angel clothed in armor that glinted like silver polished by the sun. The plates of his armor seemed to pulse with light. His face was partly hidden by the radiance, but I could feel his eyes on me, sharp, knowing, but not unkind. A great sword rested in his hands, its blade glowing with a light that seemed to cut through not air, but time itself. The angel raised his head toward heaven and then looked down at the world. The air around us became heavy, charged. Like before a storm breaks, I could sense a divine authority, the kind that no human government could imitate. No army could challenge, no law could bind. Slowly he lifted the sword high above his head. His movements were deliberate, each moment stretching as if heaven itself was holding its breath. I glanced at Jesus, his gaze fixed on the angel. Then he turned to me and spoke, his voice clear, yet resonating deep inside my bones. "These are not acts of wrath. They are awakenings. I am showing you what is about to come so that you will speak, so that you will warn, so that hearts will turn back before it is too late." The angel's wings shifted. Their span seemed to cover horizons. Then in a single motion, swift yet impossibly precise, he brought the sword down, not once but 5 times, each strike landing in a different place on the globe, all in the same instant. I could almost feel the vibration in my chest. The ground of the world seemed to flinch, a silent shudder rippling across land and sea. There was no explosion of fire, no clouds of smoke, but a deep, soundless tremor, as though the planet itself had gasped. I looked closely at the points of impact. Light flared and faded quickly, leaving no marks in the air, but I knew something below the surface had shifted forever. Jesus spoke again. "These 5 are chosen not at random. They will happen together, so that no one can dismiss them as coincidence. They will shake foundations, not just in the soil, but in the heart, not to destroy for destruction's sake, but to reveal what cannot be shaken and what must fall away." I wanted to ask where they were, but before I could form the question, the scene pulled me closer to the first location, like a wave drawing me in. The world below swelled larger in my sight, and suddenly I was descending through the clouds. The smell of stone, the sound of distant bells reached my ears. It was Rome. I recognized it from pictures and books, from news images of Easter gatherings. St. Peter's Square stretched wide beneath a pale sky. Pilgrims moved slowly across the cobblestones, some praying, some taking photographs, their voices a low murmur carried by the breeze. But even as I looked, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Tall and proud for centuries, groaned as cracks snaked upward. Dust fell like a light rain. Statues high above seemed to bow, not in reverence, but in sorrow. I felt my throat tighten. It was like watching elders you love collapse under a burden they can no longer bear. People cried out. Some ran, some froze in place, their hands gripping rosaries or phones, unsure which one could save them. I turned to Jesus. His face was heavy with grief, not anger. His voice was low, but carried the weight of eternity. My house has been tested and found wanting. Corruption and cowardice must be swept away. This is not to destroy my church, for the gates of hell will never prevail against it, but to purify it. As he spoke, I could see in my mind images layered over the crumbling square, meetings in shadowed rooms, truths bent to please the powerful, gold chalices shining while the poor stood hungry outside. The mixture of holy and human failing staining the very light that should shine clear. His words pierced me. This was not an attack from enemies. This was a cleansing from within. The shaking grew stronger. Yet amid the dust I saw small figures moving with calm, priests guiding people to safety, nuns kneeling in prayer, lay believers helping strangers stand, their faces lit with a quiet strength. They were like small candles that refused to go out. Even as the wind howled around them, my heart warmed at the sight. Even in collapse there was hope. The kind of hope that rests not on buildings but on the rock himself. Jesus leaned closer. The foundation must be me, not tradition alone, not habit, not human pride. Without me, it will not stand. I am shaking what can be shaken, so that what is eternal will remain. His voice trailed off, but the meaning filled me completely. I understood that this was only the first of the 5 strikes, and that each one would uncover something hidden, something humanity did not want to face. The square faded from view, replaced by the curve of the earth again. The angel still hovered above it all, his sword now at rest, but his eyes fixed on the next place. I felt a chill, knowing the journey had only just begun. My pulse quickened. My hands felt clammy, though I had no physical body in that moment. I braced myself, ready for whatever the second strike would reveal, unaware just how deeply it would challenge the world's idea of safety and control. I felt myself pulled again, not falling, but being drawn, like a tide carrying me without effort. The blue of the ocean spread out beneath me, then shapes of land emerged. And before I could think, I was standing among ancient stones and wide open space. The air held a solemn weight. I knew instantly this was still Rome, the same place, but now the vision was pulling me deeper into its meaning. The shaking continued, though softer now, as if the first violent tremors had passed, but the ground was still uneasy. St. Peter's Square stretched out before me, but it was different, quieter. The tourists were gone. The chatter was gone, and in its place was a strange stillness. I could hear my own breathing. The dust settled slowly in the pale light. Every column and statue now bore the scars of the quake. Then I noticed something that froze me. The great statues of saints and apostles high above were not shattered. They were leaning, their faces tilted down, their bodies bent forward, not as if they were falling, but as if they were bowing. Their expressions carved in stone seemed heavy with grief, as if they themselves were mourning what had happened. My chest tightened. I could almost feel their sorrow. Jesus stood beside me, his eyes fixed on the scene, his voice low and steady. This place has carried my name for centuries, but along with the truth have come layers of dust. The dust of ambition, the dust of compromise, the dust of human pride. I am sweeping it away, not to erase, but to restore, not to break faith, but to free it from what binds it. Images flashed before me again. Faster now. A priest counting donations in a gold-plated box while ignoring the beggar outside. A leader speaking holy words but with an empty heart. Ceremonies performed without love. The motions without the meaning. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Every image struck me like a blow. These were wounds hidden under robes, and the quake was tearing them open for all to see. I thought of my own church back home in the Philippines, the potluck Sundays, the youth group meetings, the times when we sang with joy, but also the times when gossip spread faster than the gospel, when we worried more about appearances than about hearts. The vision in front of me was not just about Rome, it was about all of us. The ground shifted again. A crack split the cobblestones beneath my feet. Dust rose in the air, but through it, I saw small lights, faint but unshaken. Here and there, people kneeling in prayer, holding hands, helping the injured. Their faith, like anchors holding firm in the storm. Jesus gestured toward them. These are my witnesses. They will stand when the buildings fall. They will carry the flame when the lights had go out. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, not from fear, but from the weight of it all. These few were not powerful. They had no titles, yet their faith was stronger than stone. They were not here to defend a structure, but to serve a savior. And I knew that was the kind of believer he was calling all of us to be. Then from the edge of the square, an old woman kneeling in the rubble, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes closed in prayer, her clothes covered in dust, but her face calm. There was no panic in her, only peace. I could feel it radiating from her, like warmth in the cold air. Jesus looked at me. That is the faith I am looking for. Faith that bows to me when the world shakes. Faith that does not trade truth for comfort. I wanted to speak, to promise him that I would hold that kind of faith, but my voice caught in my throat. The reality of my own weakness pressed in. How many times had I leaned on my own understanding, my own plans, instead of trusting him completely? But it was a holy sting, the kind that makes you want to change, not hide. The air began to hum, a sign that the vision was shifting. The square began to fade, the statues and stones dissolving into light. But the image of that praying woman burned in my mind. I knew I would carry her with me, a reminder that no matter how grand the building, faith is measured in hearts, not walls. As the scene lifted, I caught one last glimpse of the angel far above, his sword resting at his side, but his eyes locked on the next place, the second strike. I felt the pull again, and my heart pounded, knowing that the journey was far from over. I did not know then that what I was about to see next would be colder, quieter, and in some ways, even more unsettling than the shaking of Rome. It would not just challenge stone and mortar, but the very way people see life itself. The light shifted. The warmth of the Roman sun was gone, replaced by a pale sky and an eerie stillness. I could not hear birds, or traffic, or even the wind. It was as if the world was holding its breath. I knew without being told. I had arrived in the land of the second strike, and its silence would speak louder than any quake I had yet seen. The silence pressed against my ears until it almost hurt. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Below me spread a coastline I recognized from pictures, a place of neon lights, crowded trains, and towering skyscrapers. But now it was still, unnaturally still. The colors seemed muted, the air heavy. I hovered above the shore as the water stretched out, smooth and dark. Then from the horizon, a wave began to rise, not roaring like the ones in movies, not charging in chaos, but slow, almost solemn. It crept forward, as if it had all the time in the world. Yet I knew it was unstoppable. My chest tightened. I could feel that this was not only water, it was judgment. It was truth moving in. As the wave advanced, I noticed the lights of the city begin to blink out, one district at a time. First, the seaside towers, then the glittering signs in Tokyo's streets. The bright glow of technology that had been a source of pride for decades vanished in patches of darkness. People stood in the streets looking up, some pointing, some whispering, but no one ran. They were frozen, caught between disbelief and the strange beauty of the moment. Then the ground trembled, not in sharp jolts, but in deep rolling waves that made the tall buildings sway. Cracks split the streets, yet it felt like the shaking went deeper than stone. It was touching the very systems that defined life here, the trains that always came on time, the order that everyone trusted. The belief that human planning could prevent chaos, all of it, was shuddering. I felt the presence of Jesus beside me. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of truth. Here they have built their confidence on their own understanding, on machines, on systems, on harmony without me. They believe control is the highest goal, but control without me is an illusion. His words sank deep. I thought of how even in my own life I had clung to plans and routines as if they could save me from trouble. But storms come, whether the calendar is ready or not. The wave touched the shore, not with an explosion, but with a steady, engulfing force. Streets flooded quietly. Lights fizzled out one by one, and the silence deepened. I could feel the air thick with realization, the kind that comes when people see for the first time that the foundation they built on is not unshakable. Some faces turned upward as if searching for something they could not name. Others simply stared at the water, lips parted but no sound coming out. Before I could take another breath, the scene shifted sharply. The wet streets and neon glow melted away, and I was now surrounded by rugged mountains, their peaks dusted with snow. The air was dry, the sunlight pale, the land ancient and weathered. This was not Japan. I knew it instantly. This was Turkey. I drifted above a city where slender minarets pierced the skyline. The call to prayer had just ended, and people were walking in narrow streets, the buildings old but strong. Yet, as I watched, the ground began to shake violently. Stone walls cracked, great domes shuddered, dust billowed upward in heavy clouds, cries echoed through the streets. But then, in the middle of a wide plaza, the earth split open with a sharp, tearing sound. From the depths, something began to rise, slow and steady, breaking through centuries of soil. It was a cross, weathered, its surface covered in moss and marks from a time long forgotten. I could almost hear the gasp of the crowd. Some stepped forward in awe, others backed away in fear or anger. Jesus spoke again, his tone filled with both sorrow and pride. My cross has never left this land. Before empires came, before rulers sought to erase it, this soil carried the blood of my witnesses. The early church stood here in courage, and now the earth itself cries out for them to remember. His words painted a picture of believers from centuries past, of voices singing in hidden places, of prayers whispered in the dark, while danger lurked nearby. The reactions of the people below were divided. Some knelt immediately, tears streaming down their faces, hands reaching toward the ancient symbol as if a part of their own soul had been uncovered. Others shouted, turning away as if the sight burned their eyes. The tension rippled through the plaza, like the aftershock of the quake. But the cross stood unmoved. I felt a sharp ache in my chest, the realization that history can be buried, but never destroyed. That truth will push through stone and soil if it has to. I thought of my own country, how our own history of faith is often forgotten under the noise of politics and modern life. The vision before me was not just about Turkey. It was a mirror for every land that has traded eternal roots for temporary gains. The angel still hovered far above, his gaze fixed on the earth, and I could feel the next pull beginning. I knew there were still 2 more strikes to witness, but my mind clung to the images of the quiet wave swallowing Japan's light, and the ancient cross breaking through Turkey's ground. They were so different, yet both revealed the same truth. Foundations without God will fall, and what is buried for him will rise again, no matter how deep the world tries to hide it. The light shifted again, the air changing as if a new wind was calling me onward. And deep inside, I braced for the next vision, wondering how much more my heart could bear to see before this journey was over. The wind that carried me from Turkey was sharp and restless. It swirled around me like unseen currents. And, in moments, the cold mountain air gave way to the salty scent of the Pacific. I looked down and knew instantly where I was. The west coast of the United States, a place I had only seen in films and photographs. The Great Golden Gate Bridge stretched across the water, a symbol of connection, strength, its red towers rising boldly into the sky. But the scene shifted quickly. The bridge began to tremble, not with the gentle sway it was built to handle, but with violent twisting. The steel groaned under the strain. Cables snapped one by one, their sound sharp as whips. The roadway rippled, as if it were nothing more than ribbon caught in the wind. My stomach tightened. It was like watching pride itself unravel in front of me. In the distance, Los Angeles shimmered under the sun. Glass towers and sprawling neighborhoods. A city built on dreams and light. But as the ground below began to shake, those towers quivered. Huge sheets of glass raining down like deadly shards. Concrete split open, streets buckled, and plumes of dust rose where entire blocks collapsed. Yet what caught my attention more than the destruction was the stillness of the people. They stood frozen, eyes wide, mouths open, unable to comprehend that the very ground they trusted could betray them. Jesus stood beside me, his gaze fixed on the city, his voice quiet but firm. They have built towers higher than their fear of me. They have exalted individualism and pride above obedience. They have trusted their wealth, their influence, their inventions, as if these could make them unshakable. But they have built on sand. His words echoed in my heart, and I thought of how often people measure success by how high they can climb, not by how deep their foundation goes. Above the city, a strange light flickered in the sky, not fire as we know it, not smoke or lightning, but cold flames dancing like a message painted across the heavens. They glowed without heat, yet their presence pressed against my spirit, heavy with meaning. It was a warning without words, an unmissable sign that what the world trusted was about to be tested beyond its limits. Then the scene blurred, and when it cleared, the air felt different again, heavier. The horizon stretched wide with forests, rivers, and cities marked by ornate domes that gleamed faintly, vast and quiet. The land beneath me seemed to hum with history, like a song of both beauty and sorrow. The cities were crowned with churches, their golden tops shining even in the grey light. But the stillness did not last. The ground rumbled deeply. Buildings quaked. Great Orthodox cathedrals shuddered, their domes swaying as cracks split their walls. The sound of breaking stone rolled across the streets. People ran. Others simply stood rooted to the spot, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. Then the earth beneath a large square split open violently, a dark wound tearing through the pavement. From the depths, something rose slowly but with unstoppable force, ancient and weathered, its surface rough with the marks of centuries, moss clinging to its arms. I could sense it had been hidden for ages, buried under regimes and systems that had tried to erase its presence. But now it stood tall in the open air, undeniable, unshaken by the chaos around it. Jesus' voice came, steady and unyielding. My cross has never left this land. Before the empires rose and fell, before armies marched, before rulers silenced my people, this soil carried the faith of those who would not bow to any name but mine. Now the ground itself calls them back. His words filled the space, drawing a line between the past and the present, between a faith fierce and pure, and the years it had been hidden under the weight of human power. The crowd's reaction was torn in two. Some fell to their knees weeping, reaching out as if the cross itself could lift the burden from their souls. Others turned away, anger flashing in their eyes, shouting as if they could push the sight back into the ground. The tension in the air was thick, a battle between remembrance and rejection playing out in the open square. But the cross remained, silent, yet speaking louder than any voice there. I watched, my heart heavy, thinking of how easily nations can forget, how easily truth can be buried under politics, or the desire to control. Yet here was proof that what belongs to God will rise no matter how long it has been hidden. I thought of the Philippines, of how our own history of faith can be clouded by distraction and division, and I knew the warning was for us as well. The angel was still above, his sword at his side, but his eyes watchful, as if measuring the weight of what he had just shown me. The world below felt smaller now. The 5 strikes were not just disasters, they were revelations, each one tearing away the illusions that people held, each one exposing what had been hidden in plain sight. And with each vision, my own heart felt more urgently that time was shorter than we think. What you have seen is not for you alone. It is for those who will listen. Tell them that what is built without me will fall. Tell them that what is hidden for me will rise. Tell them that the shaking is not the end, but the beginning of something new. If they will turn back. His words carried both the weight of warning and the light of hope. And I knew that my journey was not finished yet. The wind began to stir again, carrying me upward. The lands of the west coast and Russia shrinking beneath me. The shape of continents coming back into view. And I braced myself for what I sensed would be the most staggering vision yet. A vision, not of one place, but of the entire world shifting before my eyes. The wind that carried me higher grew quieter. And in that stillness, I saw the whole earth turning slowly below me, the blues of the oceans, the greens and browns of the land, clouds drifting in slow spirals. It looked so peaceful from here, almost untouched. But then I felt a pulse, deep and steady, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. It grew stronger, until the surface below began to move. At first it was subtle, coastlines shifting slightly, a thin line of white, where the water met the shore, growing and shrinking in places. But then the changes accelerated. Entire stretches of land slid beneath the waves. New islands rose from the deep. Rivers carved new paths through continents. Mountain ranges crumbled in one place and grew taller in another. I stared, breathless. As the map I had learned since childhood became unrecognizable in moments, borders faded. Not because they were erased by human hands, but because the land beneath them no longer matched the lines drawn on paper. What was once certain was now fluid. What had seemed permanent was suddenly temporary. There was no war, no smoke, no sound of weapons, just the relentless, quiet power of the earth remade. Jesus stood beside me, his voice clear and unshakable. What humanity has drawn, I will redraw. This is not the work of politics or conquest. This is my justice and my mercy. I am reordering what man has disordered. His words felt like they were etched into my very soul. They were not meant to inspire fear, but to strip away illusions. I looked again at the shifting earth and saw more than geography changing. I saw cities that had relied on wealth now struggling to stand, communities that had trusted in their own strength now searching for help. I saw hidden truths coming to light, the pride of nations humbled, the quiet faith of the unseen suddenly shining. And I understood. This shaking was about the heart as much as the soil. Jesus spoke again. What is not built on me will crumble. What is true will stand. His tone was not harsh, but it carried a weight that made me want to bow my head. I thought of my own life, the things I had built out of habit, the parts of my faith I had let become routine instead of relationship, and I realized those too would be tested. The earth continued to change before my eyes, and I began to feel something unexpected, but hope. Because even as some lands sank, others rose. Even as certain borders vanished, communities began to connect in ways they had not before. It was as if the shaking was making room for something better, something that had been waiting to grow. Jesus turned his eyes to me. This is mercy, not wrath. This is a wake-up call, a final chance for humanity to turn back before the door closes. Prepare not with fear, not with hoarding, not with hiding, but with faith. Live by my word. Cleanse your heart. These words cut deeper than any warning I had heard before, because they were not about survival of the body, but of the soul. I thought of all the ways people prepare for disaster, filling storerooms, building walls, buying weapons. But here, he was telling me none of that would matter if the foundation was wrong. He was telling me to prepare in the way the world forgets, by humility, repentance, and trust. The shifting slowed, and I noticed something strange. In the places where the land had changed most, I could see points of light glowing, some faint, some bright, scattered across mountains. They were people, kneeling, serving, their faces turned upward. These were the ones who had anchored themselves to the rock before the shaking came. They were steady because they were held by something greater than the ground under their feet. The angel was still above, his sword now sheathed, his eyes watching as if this transformation was the purpose of every strike he had delivered. I realized then that the 5 blows were not separate events. They were parts of one plan, each one loosening the grip of pride, each one revealing the truth beneath the surface. And together they were leading to this the world remade, not by human ambition, but by divine hands. I looked once more at the earth, now different, now alive in a new way, and I felt a pull in my spirit, a deep knowing that what I had seen was already beginning. Even if the maps on our walls still looked the same, the changes had started. Unseen but unstoppable, I felt my heart race at the thought that this vision was not far away but close, maybe even at the door. The wind began to stir again, and I knew I was being carried to the next part of this journey, the place where I would understand what my role in all of this was, and how I could speak so that others would hear. The sight of the reshaped earth faded into light, but its image burned into my mind. A reminder that everything we think is fixed can be moved, and everything we think is ours is only ever his. The light around me softened until I felt my feet touch solid ground again. I blinked and realized I was back in my own home. The familiar creak of the wooden floor under me, the sound of rain tapping against the window, the faint scent of coffee still lingering in the air. But nothing felt the same. My body was here, yet my heart was still burning with everything I'd seen. I sat in my old wooden chair, the same one where I had first lost consciousness. But now my hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of the vision. Every image replayed in my mind. The angel's sword cutting through the earth, the 5 strikes, the cities shaking, the crosses rising from the ground, the map of the world redrawn. I could feel it all pressing against me like a tide that would not go back. For a moment, I wanted to tell myself it had just been a strange dream, that I could go back to my quiet life, water the plants, visit the market, go to church on Sunday. But deep down, I knew that was impossible. Jesus' voice was still in my ears, firm and clear. You must speak. You must testify. Fear no one. This is your purpose. Fear rose in me anyway. I thought of my neighbors, my friends at church, my own relatives. Would they believe me? Or would they laugh? Would they call me crazy? I imagined their faces, the polite smiles, the quick changes of subject. But then I remembered his eyes, the way he looked at me when he spoke, as if the truth was more important than my comfort, as if even one person's hearing and turning back was worth any risk. I stood and walked to the small table where my Bible lay. I touched the worn cover, feeling the edges smooth from years of use, and I prayed, "Give me courage. Give me words. Show me how to tell this without fear." As I prayed, peace began to settle over me. Not the kind that says everything will be easy, but the kind that says, I will be with you no matter what comes. I began to write, first in small notes, just fragments of what I had seen. Rome and its bowed statues, Japan's silent wave, Turkey's ancient cross, the West Coast's twisting bridge, Russia's rising faith, the shifting earth, each line pulling the next from memory, each detail vivid and alive. It was as if I was back there seeing it again. I knew I could not keep it hidden, not after being shown so much. The rain outside grew heavier, drops racing down the glass, and I thought of the lights I had seen scattered across the reshaped world, the ones who stood firm because they were anchored to the rock. I knew that was what Jesus wanted for all of us, to be light in the shaking, to be steady in the storm. I felt a strange mix of sorrow and hope. Sorrow for those who would not listen, hope for those who still could. I told myself I would start small, maybe tell my closest friends, then the church, then anyone who would hear. I did not know if I would be mocked or ignored, but I understood now that obedience was not about the outcome. It was about faithfulness, about speaking, even if the world covered its ears. As the hours passed, I realized something had changed in me. The fear of being judged had lost its grip. My worries about what people thought felt small compared to the enormity of what was coming. It was as if I had been carrying stones in my hands for years and finally set them down. The only weight I felt now was the responsibility to deliver the message. When night came, I did not sleep easily. Each time I closed my eyes, the images returned. But instead of overwhelming me, they pushed me forward. Tomorrow I will begin. I thought, tomorrow I will tell the first person I see, and I will not stop until I have spoken this to as many as I can. The time for silence is over. The shaking has already begun. If you are hearing my voice right now, I want you to understand this. The shaking is already here, maybe not in the ground beneath your feet yet, but in the world around you. You can feel it in the chaos, in the division, in the way truth is being buried under noise. Do not wait for disaster to wake you up. Do not wait until it is too late to find your foundation. This is the time to turn back, to stand firm, to live in truth. I'm asking you, be one of the lights that stays burning when everything else goes dark. And if this message has reached you, if it has stirred something inside you, do not keep it to yourself. Subscribe to this channel right now so you can hear the next warning and the next story before the world drowns it out. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Because this message is not just for one nation, it is for all of us, together. Let us be ready before the shaking comes.